In today's video, we're checking out the full frame Sirui 35mm T2.9 anamorphic lens for the owl mount. Let's get into it. All of this footage was shot handheld using the S5IIX, graded using the Blockbuster LUT and not the video store. Welcome back, folks. My name's Shane. This is the world's smallest full-frame anamorphic lens. It's even smaller than the Sirui Micro Four Thirds anamorphic lens that I reviewed a while back, making it a great choice for the LUMIX S9, S5II, or S5IIX. 35mm T2.9 is part of the Sirui Satin Carbon Fibre series of lenses and weighs in at only 390 grams. This makes it great for both gimbal or handheld shooting. Before we get into this video, just a quick disclaimer. I want to thank Sirui for sending this out for this video review. I really appreciate it. If you want to check this out, I'll link it down below. Just know no money's changed hands and all thoughts about this are my own, and I'll give you my thoughts about it throughout this video. Let's talk quickly about anamorphic lenses. So you get a very cinematic look with unique lens flaring and an interesting bokeh, and this is no exception. The entire series for the owl mount so far include this 35mm. There's a 50 and 75mm also available, all of which either come with a blue or neutral flare option. This time I opted for the neutral flare option as it's a little bit less sci-fi looking. Another contributing factor to the end result when shooting with anamorphic lenses is of course that 2.8:1 super widescreen aspect ratio. While I have conformed all of the video sample footage shot with this lens to a standard 16:9 timeline, I've also uploaded a second video just showcasing the sample footage in a native timeline. So if you want to check that out, I'll link it down in the description box. To set up your camera correctly for shooting with this lens, you need to be shooting open gate or in a mode with a 3:2 aspect ratio. If you use a LUMIX S9 with this, there's also that new MP4 Lite codec option with a 3:2 aspect ratio. And there is one thing missing from the camera side. This lens is a 1.6 times anamorphic, but if I go into the anamorphic D-squeeze options in camera, I have 1.3, 1.33, 1.5, which is the closest, 1.8, or 2.0. So I just set it up at 1.5, and it seemed to look fairly fine on the screen. Now, if you're using an external monitor, this won't be an issue. Most of them do have a 1.6 times D-squeeze option. This doesn't affect the recording, it's just the preview in camera. Now let's talk about the feel of the focus and aperture ring. They both feel very fluid. The aperture ring has slightly more tension than the focus ring, but they both feel great and there's not much in it. So they both feel very fluid and smooth to use. Another thing to mention when it comes to usability without using an external monitor is I found it a lot easier at f4 to nail critical focus just using the focus peaking in camera. Now, if you're using an external monitor that has a lot more aggressive focus peaking, you won't have a problem shooting T2.9. Just know I had a number of shots that were completely out of focus when shooting videos or photos at T2.9. Now, speaking of photography, we went down to Caldermead Farm Market here in Victoria, Australia to shoot some photos, and this lens really performed great when, of course, I nailed focus. While I'm not an anamorphic photographer by any stretch of the imagination, the end result looked really awesome. The photos are nice and sharp, the colors and contrast are also excellent. This was all shot using the natural picture profile with only slight adjustments in post-production. Anamorphic photography is great fun. I encourage you to give it a go if you plan on buying this lens. Keep the camera in the 3:2 aspect ratio, de-squeeze it in post, and you'll be in business. Whether I'm shooting videos or photos at T2.9, T4, 5.6 or any other aperture, I have no problems with the sharpness on this lens. If you're not familiar with shooting with anamorphic lenses and you've been using primes like the S series, for example, from LUMIX, the edges of frame will look a lot more warped on an anamorphic lens compared to a traditional lens. So this might be something that you've never noticed before looking at footage, but it's quite normal and it just adds to the overall aesthetic. Another characteristic that a lot of people like about anamorphic lenses is how it renders the background and also the bokeh ball effect. Now this lens is limited to T2.9 and it also has a pretty far minimum focusing distance, and it's not as easy to get the bokeh ball effect unless you're shooting in a particular scenario at minimum focus. But Just know T2.9 is also fast enough to blur out the background without it being too excessive. If you watch a lot of high production films or short films or whatever, there's more in focus than you might actually think. And I really enjoyed this lens, even shooting up to f5.6. When it comes to focus breathing, this lens performs really well. And focus breathing is where you see sort of the edges of frame zoom in and out. As you're pulling focus from minimum to infinity focus and back, you'll kind of get a zoom in effect occasionally. This is pretty minimal on this lens, which is quite good. The unboxing experience is always one thing I like to give Sirui credit for. They actually put a little effort in. So unlike a lot of lens manufacturers, these come vacuum sealed inside the box with a silica gel packet. There's some documentation and a warranty card in there. And there's also a little microfiber carry bag. This lens comes included with a front and rear lens cap here, and we get a 58mm filter thread on the front if you plan on using NDs. While the unboxing experience has no impact on the image quality, I just wanted to include this as it's a really nice touch. Sirui have really been putting out a bunch of great cine lenses over the last few years, and this is definitely up there as one of my favorites, alongside the Sirui Nightwalker series of lenses for micro four thirds. Now, I reviewed those a little while back, and if you want to check out that link, I'll also post it down below. While the blue flaring looks great for night scenes and moody production work, I think the neutral flaring of this lens is more versatile and also less distracting. Either way though, you can't go too far wrong for shooting short films or productions when you require an anamorphic lens that doesn't break the bank. The only downside of this lens, as I mentioned, is the long minimum focusing distance of 90 centimeters. This makes it pretty tough to get a close-up or tight shot on your subject. Overall, this lens is fun, it's small, it's more affordable than other cine options out there on the market, so a massive thanks to Sirui for sending this out. If you want to check it out again, I'll link it down in the description box below. Leave a thumbs up if you can, and I will catch you on the next one. Let us know what you think of this if you already own one. Catch you soon.